The year was 2125. Earth had entered a new era of exploration and technology. The vast reaches of space were no longer beyond their grasp. Humanity had built incredible ships capable of traveling light years away, and Earth's military had grown strong, ready to defend their people from any threat. But even with all their advancements, nothing could prepare them for what was coming. It all started one quiet night in the control room of Earth's Central Command. The lights above flickered as the crew worked through their usual tasks. Captain Diana Markov, a seasoned leader with a reputation for staying calm under pressure, sat at her desk, staring at a screen filled with data. She was trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. Suddenly, the calm atmosphere was broken by a loud alarm blaring through the room. A red warning light flashed across the ceiling, casting an eerie glow over the control center. Everyone's eyes snapped to the screen in front of Captain Diana. A signal had been detected. It wasn't just any signal, though. This one was different. It had a strange frequency, unlike anything the team had ever encountered before. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice tense. He turned his chair toward her, pointing at the large holographic screen. The signal was faint, but there was no mistaking it. It was coming from deep in space, far beyond Earth's usual patrol zones. Diana's heart skipped a beat. She had been in space long enough to know that such signals could mean many things, most of them bad. She leaned forward, squinting at the screen, trying to make sense of the transmission. The signal crackled, as if struggling to maintain its connection. It was weak, but as it stabilized, a voice began to speak, low, distorted, and urgent. "Red alert, the human warship. It is coming. Brace yourselves." The voice cut out for a brief moment before continuing. "This is a warning. The ship is heading towards you. It is already too late." The transmission stopped. There was nothing more. No explanation. Just silence. Diana's mind raced. She stared at the screen, trying to understand what she had just heard. The message was so strange. The phrase human warship wasn't something she had ever heard of. Who sent it? And why was the message so urgent? The entire control room was silent, the tension thick in the air. Lieutenant Carter looked at Diana, his face pale. "What do we do now, Captain?" he asked. Diana took a deep breath. She knew this wasn't just a random message. Someone was trying to warn them. But who? "We need to find the source of that signal," Diana said firmly. "Get me the coordinates now." As the crew worked quickly to track the signal's origin, Diana's mind raced. She had never heard of a human warship. The message was a warning, but who could it be warning them about? What was this ship, and why was it coming to Earth? The team continued to work tirelessly. Maps of the galaxy lit up the screens, and crew members moved quickly between stations, analyzing the signal, trying to locate where it had originated. After what felt like an eternity, Lieutenant Carter called out, "I've got it, Captain. The signal is coming from the edge of known space, near the galactic frontier." Diana's eyebrows furrowed. The galactic frontier was a region beyond Earth's established borders. Few ships had ventured that far, and even fewer had returned. It was a dangerous, uncharted area, filled with mysteries that no one dared explore. The last time anyone had gone that far was years ago, and no one had heard from them since. The crew exchanged worried glances. The idea of a human warship in that region was almost impossible to believe. Humanity hadn't built such a vessel, at least not to their knowledge. Diana stood up, her mind sharp and focused. This was no ordinary message. It was a warning, and whatever it was heading straight for Earth. She felt the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. She turned to her officers. "Prepare the fleet," Diana ordered. "If this warship is real, we need to be ready for anything. No one goes near the galactic frontier without a reason." As the team scrambled to follow her orders, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that something huge was about to unfold. The question was, what was this mysterious warship, And why had it chosen now to make itself known? The clock was ticking, and they had no time to waste. Just as the crew finished their preparations, an alert popped up on the main screen. It was a new signal, this one coming from the same location as the previous transmission. But this time, it was much stronger. The words appeared on the screen in bold, flashing red letters. The warship approaches. Its arrival is inevitable. Prepare for impact. The room went quiet again. Captain Diana felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The message was clear. The warship was coming, and whatever it was, it would arrive soon. She looked out the window, staring at the stars in the distance. Something about this felt different. Something was about to change. Earth was no longer just a peaceful planet in the vastness of space. A new chapter was about to begin. Diana turned back to her team, her voice steady but determined. Stay sharp, everyone. We've just entered the unknown. The lights of Earth's central command flickered, a low hum of power coursing through the complex. Inside, Captain Diana Markov stared out the vast window, her gaze fixed on the starry expanse before her. The mysterious signal still echoed in her mind. It had been hours since the warning transmission, and the crew had scrambled to make sense of it. But still, no answers had come. The silence in the control room was deafening. No one knew who sent the message or why it spoke of a human warship. There were no records of such a ship in Earth's databases. No one had ever heard of it before. The unsettling thought that they might be dealing with a force beyond their understanding weighed heavily on Diana's chest. The sudden blare of alarms shattered her thoughts. It was the last thing she expected to hear in the stillness of the night. Everyone in the room jumped, instantly turning toward the holographic screens. Lieutenant Carter was the first to speak. Captain, you need to see this. Diana quickly strode toward the control panel, her eyes scanning the data on the screen. A massive shape was emerging from the void, its outline becoming clearer with each passing second. It was huge, larger than any ship they had ever encountered. The ship's hull was dark, with sharp angles and menacing lines. A warship, no doubt about it. The crew held their breath. The unknown ship's size alone was enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. The atmosphere in the room thickened with a sense of urgency. The warship was closing in on Earth's space, and it was moving at an alarming speed. The unknown signal had been right. The warship was real. Get me a scan of its specs, Diana ordered, her voice steady, but betraying a hint of tension. She knew that they had no time to waste. The warship was heading directly toward Earth. Lieutenant Carter worked quickly, his fingers flying over the console. He didn't need to be told twice. He knew what was at stake. Seconds ticked by, the hum of machines filling the room as the data streamed in. It's not like anything we've ever seen, Carter said, his voice laced with disbelief. The readings are off the charts. This thing's technology. It's far beyond ours. Diana's mind raced as she processed the information. How was this possible? Could this be the ship from the mysterious transmission? The one they had just heard about? It didn't make sense. Humanity had no such ships. No one did. Captain, the ship is slowing down, Carter continued, his eyes wide with uncertainty. It's about to enter our atmosphere. A deep, uneasy silence filled the room as everyone around Diana waited for her next command. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about technology, it was about humanity's survival. Prepare the fleet, Diana said, her voice now sharper than ever. We don't know if this is a hostile force or something else entirely, but we have to be ready for anything. Scramble every fighter. Prepare for defensive maneuvers. The command was simple but essential. The human warships weren't as advanced as this unknown behemoth, but Earth's forces would have to stand their ground. They couldn't afford to back down now. The control room buzzed to life as her crew moved quickly to follow her orders. In the midst of the controlled chaos, Diana's thoughts kept drifting back to the message they'd received earlier. The warning was clear. The ship was coming. But why hadn't they been able to identify it sooner? A low rumble filled the room as the ship's massive engines came into full view on the screen. The warship wasn't just entering Earth's atmosphere. It was heading straight for the planet. Diana's heart pounded as she stared at the approaching ship. It was as though it were staring back at them, looming like an ancient predator. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. She could feel the tension tightening in her chest as the seconds passed. They were so close now. Who would build a ship like that? And why? The answer seemed just out of reach. Her eyes flicked over the console in front of her, and then back to the ship. No answers, only questions, and the terrifying reality that they might not be prepared for what was to come. "Captain, the ship is hailing us," Lieutenant Carter called out. His voice trembled with both shock and urgency. "Put it through," Diana replied, her voice steady despite the racing thoughts in her mind. A distorted image appeared on the holographic screen. It was hard to make out at first. Flickering static obscured most of the details. But there was something there, a figure wearing a dark, sleek uniform. Their face was hidden behind a mask, their voice muffled by interference, but their tone was unmistakably authoritative. "This is Captain Aurelius of the Terran warship, approaching Earth's space. You have been warned. Stand down and prepare for your reckoning." The voice was cold, calculated. Diana's blood ran cold. Terran warship. The message was right. The ship was human, but it wasn't the humans they knew. This was something entirely different. A new faction. A rogue force. Her mind raced with possibilities, but there was no time for answers now. The warship was practically on top of them, and Captain Diana had no choice but to act quickly. "Open a channel," Diana ordered, her voice unwavering. She would not show fear. "This is Captain Diana Markov of Earth's Central Command. You are entering our space without permission. Identify yourself immediately and stand down, or we will be forced to respond." For a long moment, there was no reply. Then, the figure on the screen spoke again, their voice even colder. "We were sent to test humanity's readiness. Prepare yourselves, Captain Markov. You will soon understand the cost of defying the Terran warship." The screen went dark. The transmission ended abruptly. A cold shiver ran down Diana's spine. This wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. And there was no turning back. Diana turned to her crew. Their faces mirrored her own disbelief, but the time for questions was over. They needed to act, and fast. "Ready the fleet," she said again, more forcefully this time. "Prepare for battle." The warship was closing in. Earth's fate was about to be decided. The warship loomed closer, casting a dark shadow across the stars as it approached Earth's atmosphere with frightening speed. On the bridge of the human fleet command, the mood was tense, suffocating, as the realization of what they were about to face began to settle in. The mysterious Terran warship wasn't just a new threat. It was something humanity had never even considered. Captain Diana Markov stood at the helm, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. Her breath was steady, but her mind was spinning. The message from the warship replayed in her head. "Prepare yourselves. You will soon understand the cost of defying the Terran warship." The word Terran still didn't make sense. Humanity had only ever heard it in ancient history, before the Great Wars when Earth was united under one banner. But that unity had long since shattered, and Earth had become fragmented, divided into various factions. Yet this Terran ship claimed to be a force of the past, and its technology was beyond anything anyone on Earth had ever seen. "Captain, the warship is in range," Lieutenant Carter reported from his station, his voice tense but focused. His eyes flicked to the glowing red lights that now flashed on his console. "It's heading directly for our fleet. They're not stopping." Diana's jaw tightened. She knew their defensive systems were primitive compared to the incoming warship. A fight against such an advanced opponent would be a gamble at best and disaster at worst. Still, she couldn't afford to back down. Not now. "Status of our fleet?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline that surged through her veins. "What's the readiness of our forces?" "Fleet is in position, Captain," Carter replied. "Our ships are equipped with the standard arsenal: energy shields, plasma cannons, defensive drones, but none of that will stand a chance against their firepower. We're outmatched." The reality of their situation was sinking in. Their best weapons, their strongest fighters, all felt like they would be little more than a nuisance to the oncoming threat. Earth had never faced a warship of this scale. They were about to test the true limits of humanity's resilience. Diana took a deep breath. "Deploy the fighters. We'll buy ourselves time to find a way to communicate. If we can't stop them, at least we need to know who we're dealing with." The comms officer gave a sharp nod and immediately relayed the command. Within moments, the fleet's fighters launched from their docking stations, their engines roaring to life as they shot into the depths of space. The fighter pilots knew the odds. They were well aware that they were facing an opponent whose firepower could obliterate them in an instant, but they were Earth's first line of defense. "Captain," Carter called again, his face drawn with concern. "The Terran warship has activated some kind of energy shield. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. It's almost as if..." The words hung in the air as the thought struck them all simultaneously. The warship wasn't just here to fight. It was here to test. The tension on the bridge grew thick. Every officer focused on the screens in front of them, watching as their fighters approached the massive enemy ship. Diana couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something they couldn't even begin to understand. "Enemy warship has initiated communication," the comms officer called out, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm patching it through now." Diana's heart raced as she turned toward the holographic screen. The image flickered once more, and the figure from before appeared. This time, clearer, more menacing. The man wore the same dark uniform, his face still obscured by the same impenetrable mask. But his eyes, glowing faintly with an unsettling, almost unnatural light, were fixed directly on her. "Captain Markov," the voice from the Terran warship crackled through the speakers, low and cold. "Your readiness is noted, but futile. The cost of defying us will be much greater than you could ever fathom. This is not an invasion. This is a reckoning." Diana's chest tightened. There was no doubt in her mind now. The Terran warship wasn't just testing humanity's defenses, it was issuing an ultimatum. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to judge. "What do you want from us?" Diana asked, her voice firm but calm. The figure on the screen tilted its head slightly, the faintest glimmer of amusement flickering in its eyes. "I want nothing, Captain. I already have everything. The question is, what will you do when you realize you've been found wanting?" The transmission cut off abruptly, and the bridge fell into a stunned silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the words hung heavy in the air. Diana's mind was racing. The warship wasn't here to steal resources. It wasn't interested in Earth's territory. It was here for something else. But what? What are they after? She muttered to herself, the questions gnawing at the back of her mind. Why us? Lieutenant Carter turned toward her, his expression a mixture of confusion and fear. "Captain, the fighters are engaging. They're using their plasma cannons. No effect. Their shields are absorbing everything. Our forces are being shredded." Diana's eyes widened as she watched the screen, the battleships and fighter jets from Earth's fleet clashing with the overwhelming force of the Terran warship. Explosions erupted around them, but none seemed to faze the enemy ship. It was as if the warship was simply playing with them, like humans were nothing more than ants beneath its heel. Her fingers gripped the console, her mind working furiously. There had to be a way. There had to be something they were missing. The Terran warship was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. Humanity's spirit had always been its greatest strength, and if that strength meant surviving, Diana would find a way to make it count. "Get me a full scan of the enemy warship," she ordered, her voice cold and determined. "There has to be a weakness." The crew moved quickly, gathering all the data they could from their sensors. But as they worked, Diana's gaze never left the view screen, watching as her fleet was slowly decimated. It felt as though time itself was slowing down. The universe seemed to hold its breath as the fate of Earth's future hung in the balance. The battle had only just begun, and already the cost of defiance was becoming all too real. The Terran warship's silence was deafening as it hovered above Earth, its black mass blotting out the stars. From the bridge of the human fleet command, the situation had taken a dramatic turn. Despite their best efforts, the fighters had been reduced to burning wrecks in space. Each attempt to breach the warship's shields had been met with devastating failure. The warship's power seemed infinite, its weapons capable of tearing through Earth's finest technology with ease. Captain Diana Markov stood by the view screen, watching the chaos unfold. Her breath was shallow, her mind racing. The words from the Terran commander echoed in her thoughts, as chilling as they had been the first time. The cost of defying us will be much greater than you could ever fathom. Her crew, though still physically present, had fallen silent. The hum of the ship's systems, once a reassuring background noise, now felt like a reminder of how small they all were in the face of this overwhelming threat. "We need to find a way to communicate," Diana muttered under her breath. "We can't win this with weapons alone." Lieutenant Carter, ever the optimist, was one of the few who dared to speak. "Captain, we've been running scans for hours. The warship has no visible weak points. It's almost as if it's shielded on every side. Every weapon we fire just bounces off. They're not even bothered by our attacks." Diana nodded grimly, her eyes never leaving the warship's ominous silhouette on the view screen. "I know, but we can't just give up." "Captain," came the voice of the communications officer, cutting through the tension. "We're receiving another transmission from the warship." The crew straightened, exchanging uneasy glances. The Terran warship had been oddly quiet after their first encounter. Every communication up until now had been laced with cryptic threats and dark promises. What could they possibly want now? "Patch it through," Diana ordered, her voice steady despite the growing storm inside her. The holographic figure reappeared, more menacing than ever. The same dark uniform, the same strange, glowing eyes. It wasn't just the appearance that was terrifying. It was the utter confidence radiating from the figure. He wasn't here to negotiate. He wasn't here to even fight. This was something far darker. "You continue to resist," the voice of the Terran commander rang out, this time colder, more accusatory. "Foolish. You refuse to see the truth of your place in the galaxy. You are a fragile species, grasping at something greater than you can handle. A reckoning is overdue." Diana's grip tightened on the edge of the console. "We won't bow to threats." The figure's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "You mistake me for an adversary. I am not here to fight you. I am here to reveal the truth. Humanity has always been blind. Your greatest strength is the very thing that will lead to your downfall." The crew exchanged nervous looks. The statement felt like a riddle, but there was no time for interpretation. Diana took a deep breath, her mind shifting gears. There had to be more to this. Why didn't the Terran warship simply destroy them if it was truly as powerful as it seemed? "What do you want from us?" Diana asked, her voice now firm and resolute. "Tell me now." The Terran commander's smile faded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. "I want you to understand your place. You are not meant to lead. You are meant to be an example." "An example?" Carter echoed, his voice laced with disbelief. "An example of what?" The figure did not respond immediately. Instead, the image flickered slightly, as if the transmission itself was being manipulated. Diana leaned forward, her mind racing. Could they be getting closer to understanding? Could this be the moment they had been waiting for? Finally, the Terran commander spoke again, his voice even more chilling than before. "You have been given a chance. Your species has been chosen to see the truth, but you continue to defy it. The reckoning will come. It will not be just the end of your world, but a lesson for all." Diana's stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and confusion. What was he talking about? A lesson for all? Was this some kind of test? Enough, Diana snapped, her patience reaching its limit. I don't care about your cryptic words. Either you explain yourself, or we will do everything in our power to stop you. The figure tilted his head as if considering her words. There was a moment of silence, and then the voice came again, softer this time, almost pitying. You have no power here. You have only your fear. That is the only thing that binds you. Before Diana could respond, the transmission cut off once more, leaving the bridge in an eerie silence. Diana turned to her crew, her thoughts racing. Fear. That's what the Terran commander wanted. He was trying to break them down, to weaken their resolve. But if they gave in to fear now, humanity was finished. They had to push forward, no matter what. Status report, Diana barked, turning toward Carter. We're running out of options, Captain, Carter said, his voice grim. The warship is charging up its weapons. I don't know how much longer we can hold out. Diana's mind worked furiously. There had to be something they were missing. The Terran warship was more than just a weapon. It was a message. But why Earth? Why now? What did humanity have that was so important? Prepare the last line of defense, she ordered. If they won't communicate, then we'll make them. Open a direct line to the warship. We'll force them to explain themselves. But deep down, she knew that force might not be enough. This wasn't just about firepower. It was about something much deeper, a challenge that humanity had yet to fully comprehend. As the tension mounted, Captain Markov's mind turned toward an idea, something from Earth's history that might hold the key. If there was one thing humanity had learned through centuries of war and conflict, it was that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about resilience. And the one thing the Terran warship hadn't accounted for was humanity's unshakable will to survive. The time for questions was over. The time for action had begun. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder, an unsettling noise that echoed in the silent bridge. Every crew member felt the weight of what was about to happen. Despite their training, their strength, and their resolve, they all knew that they were facing something far beyond their comprehension. The Terran warship was preparing to strike, and Earth's defenses were crumbling. Captain Diana Markov paced back and forth, her mind racing through every possibility, every option. Her crew was in position, awaiting her orders. She had to act, but what could she possibly do when their opponent was so far beyond their reach? Prepare the escape pods, she ordered, though she hated even saying the words. In case, we need to abandon the ship. Lieutenant Carter glanced at her, his eyes filled with doubt. Captain, are you saying we're giving up? Diana paused, her gaze hardening. No. But if we can't stop them, we need to make sure the rest of Earth has a fighting chance. Carter nodded but didn't say anything. The crew was still haunted by the earlier transmission. The Terran commander's chilling words echoed in everyone's mind. You are meant to be an example. What did that mean? And why had he warned them so cryptically? They still didn't know the true purpose of the Terran warship, but the longer they waited, the more they felt like pieces on a board. The warship, dark and ominous, loomed ever closer. The Earth's defenses, once a formidable force, had already failed to penetrate its energy shields. No one could even fathom the power that the Terran forces wielded. Their weapons tore through human ships like paper, leaving nothing but burning husks. Yet, the warship hadn't launched a full assault yet. Captain, came the voice of the sensors officer, breaking the tense silence. They're charging their main weapon. The bridge fell even quieter. Captain Markov felt her heart drop. If the Terran commander had threatened them with devastation before, this was the moment when those words could become reality. What was this weapon capable of? And why had they been given no warning? I want a full scan of the warship's configuration, Diana said, forcing herself to remain calm. There has to be something we're missing, something we can use. The crew scrambled to analyze the data, but nothing stood out. The warship's structure seemed impenetrable, its systems unbreachable. It was as if it was built specifically to mock humanity's greatest efforts. As the seconds ticked away, Diana found herself staring at the enormous view screen, her hands clenched at her sides. She couldn't help but feel a strange sense of dread wash over her. The message from the Terran commander echoed in her mind again, but this time, it sounded different, like a puzzle piece falling into place. You are meant to be an example. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. The Terran warship wasn't here to simply destroy Earth. No, they had a far darker plan in mind. It wasn't about conquest, it was about destruction of the human spirit. Captain, we're detecting a massive energy buildup, the sensors officer announced. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Diana's heart raced. This was it. They were out of time. All hands, brace for impact, she ordered. Prepare to fire the final countermeasure. Lieutenant Carter hesitated. Are you sure this is the only option? We could still. This is not just a fight for survival anymore, Diana interrupted. It's a fight for humanity's identity. We will not be the example of what happens when species defy the Terran Empire. We will stand and fight to the end. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was filled with turmoil. They had no plan, no backup, and nowhere to run. But if the Terran forces were looking for an example of humanity's downfall, they were about to get a very different one. The time for defense was over. Captain, Carter said, his voice filled with something new, resolve. We're ready. Diana's eyes locked on the Terran warship. It was closing in fast, its weapons preparing to unleash hell on Earth. If they failed now, it wouldn't just be their ship that was destroyed. It would be the future of humankind itself. The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming. But there was no turning back. Fire everything we've got, she ordered. All weapons, full power. The ship shuddered as its weapon systems roared to life. Blasts of energy shot forward, the concentrated firepower streaking toward the massive warship. But as the missiles and energy blasts collided with the Terran ship's shields, they bounced harmlessly away, dissipating in the cold expanse of space. But Diana wasn't surprised. She had known this was coming. The Terran warship was far too powerful. But what she saw next left her breathless. The energy blast that had been building up within the warship, a weapon of unimaginable power, suddenly dissipated, its charge faltering. It wasn't a technical malfunction. No, it was something far more terrifying. The Terran warship was hesitating. Diana's mind raced. Why had it stopped? Was this part of their plan? Had they finally worn down the Terran commander's resolve? Captain, we're receiving another transmission, the communications officer called out. The voice was cold, just as it had been before. You don't understand. The Terran commander's voice boomed. This is no longer about war. It is about proving that your species is not fit to continue. Humanity was never meant to stand against the Terran Empire. Then why are you hesitating? Diana demanded, her voice full of challenge. There was a long silence before the Terran commander spoke again, his voice edged with something that sounded like doubt. Perhaps it is you who do not understand. The end of your world was never the goal. The goal is to make you see, to show you that your path has already been chosen for you. No matter how hard you fight, no matter how much you resist, you are insignificant. The transmission ended abruptly, and for a moment, the silence that followed felt almost as if time itself had frozen. Diana stood motionless, staring out into the void. The warship still hovered ominously in space, but something had changed. The threat remained, but now they knew something that they hadn't before. The Terrans weren't here to destroy them. They were here to break them, to erase humanity's resolve. And that, Diana realized, was something humanity could never allow. The bridge was quiet, an eerie stillness that felt out of place considering the gravity of their situation. Captain Diana Markov stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the looming warship, which still hung in space like a monstrous shadow, threatening to engulf everything they held dear. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the weight of realization. The battle was far from over. It had only just begun. "Captain," the voice of Lieutenant Carter broke the silence, his tone laced with uncertainty. "The enemy shields are still holding strong. Our weapons are ineffective. What are our next steps?" Diana turned to face him, her expression unwavering. It was moments like this, when the end seemed inevitable, that true leadership was tested. "We don't back down. Not now. Not ever. Humanity has always stood against insurmountable odds, and we will do so again." She turned back to the view screen, which displayed the massive warship. Its sleek, dark form shimmered slightly against the backdrop of stars. It was a symbol of domination, a testament to the Terran Empire's technological superiority. Yet, despite its might, Diana saw something else in it, a weakness. The Terran commander's words still echoed in her mind. "We are not here to destroy you, but to break you." "Break us," she thought. "We will show them what it truly means to fight." The comms officer interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we're receiving a new transmission. It's from the warship." Diana stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as the cold voice of the Terran commander crackled through the speakers once again. "You still don't understand, Captain. No matter what you do, no matter how much you resist, your fate has already been sealed. We are the harbingers of your extinction." The cold, dismissive tone of the Terran commander sent a chill down Diana's spine, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You can't break us," she replied, her voice steady and resolute. "You can't erase humanity's will." The warship's transmission paused for a long moment before the commander responded, his tone now tinged with something unfamiliar. A hint of frustration, maybe. "You are nothing but insects, scurrying about in the dark. Your resistance is meaningless. I will give you one last chance. Surrender and accept the inevitable, or face complete annihilation." Diana could hear the sneer in his voice, but her resolve hardened. She glanced at her crew, each one staring at her with a mixture of hope and fear. They were all depending on her to lead them through this, to give them a reason to fight. She couldn't let them down. "No surrender," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Prepare for the final stand." The crew moved quickly, each person knowing their role without needing further instructions. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the knowledge that this could be their last battle. They had one shot, one chance to turn the tide. And despite all odds, Diana felt something stirring inside her, a quiet, unshakable confidence. The warship had made a mistake. It had underestimated humanity's capacity for survival. And now, it was time to prove them wrong. "Activate the backup weapon systems," Diana ordered, her eyes scanning the data panels that flickered across the bridge. "We've got one shot at this. Make it count." Lieutenant Carter nodded. "Aye, Captain. Backup weapon systems online." The Terran warship's weapons were already charging. The countdown was ticking down, each second bringing them closer to total destruction. Diana's mind raced. If their primary weapons couldn't penetrate the warship's shields, maybe they could do something unexpected. A desperate gamble, but it was all they had left. "Deploy the gravity destabilizer," Diana said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll create an opening, just enough for our weapons to get through." Carter's eyebrows shot up. "You want to use the destabilizer now. It's untested in this kind of scenario." "The risk." "I know the risk," Diana snapped. "But what do we have to lose? Either we fight and win, or we sit here and wait for them to destroy us." "We're not giving up, Lieutenant. Do it." With a brief nod, Carter issued the command. The massive gravity destabilizer, a weapon capable of distorting gravitational fields and creating localized weak points in enemy shields, powered up. Diana held her breath as she watched the readings, her fingers tight on the edge of the console. The warship's weapons continued to charge, but now something was different. The air seemed to hum with energy, and for a brief moment, the warship's shields flickered. Just a brief flicker, But it was all Diana needed. "Fire everything we have," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. Now, the weapons on the Terran ship flashed, sending a torrent of deadly energy toward the human ship. But just before the blast could reach them, the gravity destabilizer went into full effect. A ripple of energy pulsed through space, warping the space around the incoming shots. For a split second, the Terran warship's shields weakened. That split second was all the crew needed. The backup weapons systems unleashed a barrage of fire. Missiles, lasers, and energy blasts all converged on the warship in a single concentrated strike. The sheer force of the assault created a massive explosion, blinding the bridge crew with a flash of light. For a moment, the bridge was silent. No one dared to breathe as they waited for the results. Slowly, the blinding light faded, and the view screen flickered back to life. The Terran warship was still there, but now it was visibly damaged. Its shields were down, and parts of its hull were torn open, leaking debris and energy. "We did it," the comms officer whispered in disbelief. "They're vulnerable." Diana's eyes narrowed. They had succeeded in creating an opening, but it was only temporary. The warship's command would retaliate. They had to strike fast. "Prepare for the final assault," she said, her voice hard with resolve. "This ends now." The crew rallied behind her. There was no fear in their eyes, only the fire of determination. The warship may have been powerful, but humanity had just proven that they would never be crushed, never be erased. The battle was far from over, but now, for the first time, they had a fighting chance, and they were going to take it. The final seconds ticked down on the battle clock, each moment stretching like an eternity. Diana stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the warship ahead. The once imposing enemy vessel, with its dark, menacing exterior, now seemed less invincible. It was a symbol of everything the Terran Empire believed about humanity, that they were small, weak, and insignificant, but they had underestimated the tenacity of the human spirit. "Captain, we've lost all comms with the fleet," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice tight with tension. "It's just us. We're on our own for this." Diana's gaze didn't falter. "We've always been on our own. Humanity has never needed anyone's permission to fight." Her voice was steady, but deep down, she felt the weight of the situation pressing in on her. There was no turning back now. They had one final chance to win this battle, and they had to take it. The damage from their earlier strike had forced the Terran warship to pause, but that pause was temporary. It was already regenerating, the shields slowly repairing themselves. Diana knew they couldn't waste another moment. They had no more backup, no more chances. "Prepare for the final offensive," she commanded. "Load everything we have left into the main cannons, and make sure we have enough power to push through the enemy's shields." Carter nodded, working quickly with the crew. Everyone on the bridge knew this was their moment. There was no time for hesitation, no room for error. The Terran warship had a weapon capable of devastating their ship if given the opportunity, and that's exactly what the commander of the enemy ship would try to do. But they were ready for it. They had to be. Diana turned her attention back to the view screen, where the Terran warship now loomed larger as it closed the distance. She could feel the heat of the moment rising, the entire crew silently waiting for her orders. "Captain," the sensor officer called out. "They're charging their main weapon. It's aimed at us." The warning sent a cold wave of urgency through Diana. The weapon would be deadly, but they couldn't back down. "Initiate evasive maneuvers," Diana barked. "All crew, brace for impact." The ship lurched as it began to maneuver through the debris field created by the warship's damaged hull. Their own shields flared to life, but it was clear they couldn't take another direct hit. The warship was no longer just a threat. It was a predator, hunting its prey. But Diana would not be its victim. "We need more time," she muttered to herself, her mind racing. The main weapon of the enemy ship was close to firing. If they couldn't break through its shields, their final assault would fail. Suddenly, A thought sparked in her mind. A risky, dangerous maneuver, but it might be the only way to turn the tide. She looked toward her weapons officer, determination in her eyes. "I have an idea," she said. "Prepare the secondary weapon array. On my mark. Fire everything we've got. Do not wait for my second command." The weapons officer's eyes widened, and she hesitated for a moment. "Captain, are you sure? That array is meant to be a last resort weapon. It could blow us up as much as it hurts them." "Unsure," Diana replied, the weight of her decision settling like lead in her chest. "We don't have a choice. We either win this now, or we lose everything." The crew glanced at each other, exchanging nervous looks, but they trusted her. Diana had led them through impossible odds before. They couldn't afford to question her now. Diana focused on the view screen again, watching the warship's weapon charge as the countdown clock ticked down. This was it. The enemy was about to fire their most devastating weapon, and they needed to outpace it. With a quick motion, Diana slammed her fist onto the command panel. Now, in that instant, the secondary weapon array roared to life. A series of laser beams, plasma bursts, and kinetic projectiles surged from the ship, all targeting the now weakened point on the Terran warship's hull. The weapons barrage hit like a storm, slamming into the ship's shields and weakening them further. Diana's heart pounded in her chest, knowing this was their best chance. But the warship's counterattack was already underway. Its weapon fired, sending a devastating energy blast directly toward the human ship. The beam ripped through space, bright and terrifying, closing in on their vessel at an alarming speed. "Shields at 30%, the engineer cried out. Diana's hands gripped the command chair tightly, her knuckles white as the ship lurched violently. The enemy's energy blast was getting closer, so close, in fact, that she could feel its pulse vibrating through the hull of the ship. The crew scrambled to reinforce the shields, but it was clear they wouldn't hold for long. "Hold tight, everyone," Diana shouted over the chaos. "This is our moment. We will win this fight." The Terran warship's weapon was almost upon them, its intense light flashing in the darkness of space. But then, just as the beam was about to strike, something miraculous happened. A flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns exploded in the distance, and for a split second, everything went silent. The blast from the Terran warship stopped, suspended in time as the shockwave rippled through space. For that one moment, Diana and her crew didn't know what had happened. Had they won? Had the blast been intercepted? Or had they simply been spared by some unknown force? The silence was broken by a voice. "Captain, something's coming." Diana's breath caught in her throat as a new figure appeared on the horizon of the view screen. A massive ship, unlike anything she had seen before. The unknown ship was enormous, far larger than the Terran warship. It shimmered with strange, iridescent colors, and its design was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its engines powered up, sending out a pulse of energy that immediately began to interfere with the Terran ship's systems. "It's them," Diana whispered, her voice filled with awe. The unexpected appearance of this new ship had shifted the odds dramatically in their favor. The Terran warship's shields began to flicker once again, its weapon power cutting out as if drained by the interference. The commander's voice crackled through the comms once more, but it was filled with a mix of confusion and panic. What is this?" The fear in his voice was unmistakable. The new ship continued to approach, and Diana realized that the battle was not over, but the war was about to take a very different turn. They weren't alone anymore. With renewed hope, Diana gave the order to prepare for the final push. "Let's end this. Now."